your girl Harpo. Welcome to episode 8 of Brown Girl Guild, titled Bad Brown Girl Starter Pack. So, in June of 2019, I posed a question to my followers on Instagram. What is a nice brown girl? I asked. I got tons of sarcastic answers in response, but some of them were dripping in real realities. Thank God for the archive feature on Instagram because I get to read some of those answers to you now. So, number 1, subservient and quiet. Number 2, doesn't drink or sleep around, has majority of her skin covered, can cook and clean, lives with her in-laws, doesn't go out and sits at home all day, basically a virgin, and someone whose rotis are round. If you're a brown girl / woman, or you have brown girls / women in your life, chances are that you've been subject to or seen someone in your life be subject to these carved out roles for good brown girls. I've always internalized being a bad brown girl, in contrast to these kinds of qualities that traditionally have made up a good brown girl. I'm the absolute opposite of subservient and quiet. I love to drink. I'm empowered in my sexuality. I love showing off my skin and my 11 tattoos, which is definitely not on the list of qualities for a good brown girl. I can't cook, but I am a mean cleaner, and I definitely get tekikar vibaliakar from my parents all the time. All that to say that if there is a laundry list of what constitutes a good brown girl, there's an even longer laundry list of all that constitutes a bad brown girl. Tattoos, drinking, and having a sexuality are just the beginning. And in my case, I'm 100% the black sheep of my family. Surprise, surprise! Because I very much go against the small box that historically has been made available to me. Or I'm accessing parts of life that the women in my lineage just have not been granted access to before. In this episode, I chat with an incredibly powerful woman, Barinder Rasode, who I've looked up to for years, who I was looking up to before I even came into the current consciousness that I live in, before I even understood this dichotomy between a good girl and a bad girl. Vancouver Magazine has ranked Barinder Rasode as one of the city's 50 most powerful people, and honestly, rightfully so. She's got an extensive background working with senior levels of government, stakeholders, and the private sector, and she's founded many businesses. She's rapidly become one of Canada's most notable cannabis influencers. Yeah, I said what I said. A fierce brown woman working in the cannabis industry. So much so that she founded the National Institute of Cannabis Health and Education in 2017 to promote evidence-based research and education about cannabis. And in addition to work in the cannabis space, Miss Rasode is a fierce advocate for women's rights, having co-founded a series of unique conferences called She Talks, which I had the privilege of speaking for in 2019, which is where I met the lovely Miss Barinder Rasode. What I know Barinder for the most, though, is the 2 terms she served as an elected councillor for the city of Surrey, and when she ran for mayor, and when she took leadership roles in public safety and transportation, as well as her role on the board of directors for BC's largest health authority, Fraser Health. And I'm going to be incredibly candid and honest when I say that I know Barinder mostly for these 2 roles, not because of her qualifications, her hard work, or her success or poise, but because of how she was talked about in the community and media when she was occupying these roles. Listen, ask any uncle in the community what they think about Barinder Rasode, and you'll know why Barinder is the guest for this episode, Bad Brown Girl Starter Pack. Barinder has faced so much scrutiny, as most powerful, bold women do when they step out of the confinements of this teeny tiny box they're told to spend their whole lives in. I didn't even know 90% of all the things that make up her bio, but I knew that it didn't matter how excellent this powerful brown woman was, because as brown girls, we're mostly usually told by our elders, don't be like her. How come though? Right? Like, how come? In this episode, we talk about just that. I got to chat with Barinder, who perfectly smashes this crazy dichotomy of a good brown girl and a bad brown girl. I ask her what's made her the bad brown girl for the community, how she continues to be the trailblazer she is despite the harsh criticisms that have surrounded her, and what she thinks in her mind constitutes a good brown girl. So let's jump right on in. So, Barinder, I want to get right into it. I want to jump right into it. Why did everyone in the community talk so much shit about you?
Well, Harpo, I think, only those who did can really say why. I'll share a few stories with you about how I've chosen to live my life. And, I think some of the things that brought people to really be fearful. I was the first woman elected to Surrey City Council. And honestly, the fact that that didn't happen until 2008 is really telling, especially in a community where so much of the community comes from Punjab, and I'm a Sikh Punjabi woman. And so basically, I think, and you know, because I've heard you talk about this too, and many, many women, is that I think there's certain standards and expectations that are set on women that actually come out of a place of fear. And I recognize that a little bit in myself of being a mom of a beautiful teenage woman now, too. So, what happens is that we have a very narrow corridor of what's considered to be acceptable. So when you put yourself out there and you're bold not only with your choices in your life, but you're bold in expressing your beliefs, what happens is that you get judged. So am I unique to any Western woman or actually any woman in the world? No. But because I set myself up to be in public office, people did feel like they had a right to judge who I was. So whether it was what I wore, whether it was who I was sitting and having coffee with. But really pivotal was when I chose to leave my marriage of 21 years.
Mm.
And then when you have a woman who's expressing her views on issues about ending violence in the home, talking about how South Asian boys are enabled to adapt bad behaviors and South Asian women are really compelled to step up and work harder, and because of that, are becoming more successful. Those are messages people like to hear. So when I ran for mayor, not only were my signs painted with very derogatory terms, because people made assumptions about why I left my marriage without knowing the true story, not knowing that I had not only the full support of my dad and my sons, not that I needed that, but see, even in telling the story, I feel like I need to justify it.
Justify it, yeah.
Yeah, but then when I ran for mayor, one of the most awakening moments was after the election. I got a call from a South Asian teacher who said, I really need you to come to my class. And I said, I don't have a title anymore. She says, no, I think I'd like you to see our election project. And so I was overwhelmed, moved to tears, definitely had won the class election. And afterwards, these three Punjabi girls ran up to me. They wanted a picture and they gave me big hugs and they said, we told our dads to vote for you. And they said, no, she's divorced. In that moment, what I realized is that it didn't matter how qualified I was, how hard I worked, or what my views for the community actually were. All that mattered was this narrow definition of what constitutes being allowed to have the title of being a good Punjabi woman. And I was none of those things. Not because I set out to be a badass, but because I wanted to live my life on my terms to do what was best for me and my family.
And Brenda, I've heard that story before, but it still makes me so emotional every time that the girls said, we told our dads to vote for you, but they said no because you're divorced. Because you and I connected in 2019, but ever since the first day I saw your poster for when you were running for mayor, I felt this like really strong affinity for you. And I don't know what it was, and I still don't know what it is, but I have this like really strong, deep love for you and this connection to you. And I think it is because I saw so much of what I had potential to be. And I always say that you can't become what you can't see. And so I saw you and I was like, oh, I can become that. And to hear that there was so much scrutiny and so much criticism around who you are, I felt like personally attacked because I also was like, well, why like it doesn't make sense to me. And you said something a little bit earlier where you were running for a public office and so people had a problem with that. See, in my mind, running for a position like the mayor is so respectable and it's so honorable and it's such a strong position, and it takes a lot for someone to like even consider doing something like that, and to have people criticize you and say that you're too much or you're too bad for wanting to occupy a space like that doesn't make sense to me. Because I mean, I'm not saying that one job or one kind of work is, worse over the other, but what is wrong with you even wanting to run for mayor? It doesn't make sense to me.
What it does is positions of power give women what some in our community don't want, which is power over them. And it's unfortunate that politics always gets brought down to the issue of power, because it's not. It's about community building, it's about being a visionary, it's about good government and good policy. But really, your vote then impacts both their economic choices, but choices that they feel like they should have free reign over. I remember when I started the Surrey Coalition Against Domestic Abuse, um, quote unquote supporters of mine would phone and said, "What are you doing? Why aren't you focusing on roads and bylaws and development?" And I said, "Because don't you want a better world for your daughters?" And as soon as you mention the word daughters in a conversation, the tone does change for men, but still, it's not issues that they want addressed.
Mhm.
And so I think that political office is very, very highly regarded by South Asians. We're very politically engaged per capita more than other cultures. That is not a lie. But I dare anybody to look at how many times very qualified women fall short. And we have to ask the question, do these men, particularly politically engaged men, not want women to have power over them? And that's what it ultimately gives us.
I was going to actually ask you that, like, let's just be honest here, that it was mostly uncles that were talking shit about you,
Yeah.
and you answered beautifully why that is. But I think that there's also a lot of women buy into it too. And I would be lying if I said that that wasn't the messaging that I received from any women in my life too. Like they were also equally judgy, maybe not to the same extent. And maybe it was influenced by the men in their lives. But did you see women also buying into this villainization of you when you were running for mayor, or have you experienced that kind of villainization from women across the board and in all the spaces that you occupy?
I think it's not only true of me, but it's true of all women. As soon as you sort of want to break out from the pack, I don't know if it's partly because other women want to and don't know how, or is it because then things become harder for them when women do start articulating these issues? Do those men then say to women in their lives, "Don't be like that"? And then how do women feel powerful in their own situations? Maybe it's by holding on to what they know, and they don't know or understand how to be different. A good example of that is if you look on social media, not as much on Instagram, but on Facebook, definitely. If there are posts about good news, beautiful pictures, a nice outfit, a nice meal, they get liked a lot. But as soon as you post something that questions our confines of the belief system that we've had to grow up in as South Asian women, even women don't like those posts. And
Mm.
I don't for a minute believe that they don't support them. I actually think it makes them nervous and afraid. So when we talk about this cultural shift that needs to happen for women to really authentically live and have a voice in a public platform, it's not going to just take the men. It's going to take women too. And yeah, women need to step up as well.
Yeah, and you say that don't be like that. I think that I've heard that so many times, not just in the case of you, but in any other woman. If I've mentioned it, even in my own home, if I've been like, "Oh, so and so is so cool, so and so is such a powerful woman," I've heard often around me, "Well, no, they're not," and then it's like all these stories get told about their personal life as opposed to focusing on their professional accolades or their professional success. And I think that that doesn't happen nearly as much as it does for men. Like if I've mentioned even like a really horrible man who has a lot of professional accolades but has like a really bad track record in their personal life, we're not nearly picking up the covers and looking under the rug at men and what they've done under in their personal lives. And so why do you think that? I mean, I'm not even going to ask you if you think this because I personally do believe it to be true, but why do you think men get away with a lot more if they're in positions of power than women, either professionally or personally?
Well, I'd go a little bit further than that, Harpo, and say it's not only in positions of power.
Yeah.
I think that men don't have to. Not only do they wouldn't use the term hide bad behavior, what defines bad behavior for men is very, very different than what defines bad behavior for women. There are men with profile who, are documented to have either had situations of domestic abuse in their home that they are the instigators of. There are situations where men don't keep either vows of being faithful or even indulging in good business practices. They've even done bad business practices. But the number of chances that they're given is really because people don't hold them up to any standard. It's the same adage that people say boys will be boys. It translates to men will be men, and women can will never be perfect or accepted, but men will always be perfect and can do no wrong.
Yes, and something that I heard when you were running was she couldn't even maintain her marriage. How is she going to maintain this city? If she couldn't even be a good wife and, just stick it through and put her family first, put her kids first, how do you expect me to vote for her? And I think that sentiment is disgusting. But it does not happen to men. We would never say that about a divorced man for anything. We would never judge his, the way that he navigates the rest of his life based on his like marital status or the way that he's a father. We don't do that, but we do that for women so much, especially brown women, women of color. We judge them. We use this, the how they show up as a mother and a wife and a daughter, um, as criteria for how they're going to carry out all the other tasks in their life.
Well, it was quite amazing. So while I was elected, there was a male South Asian councillor as well. And we would be at events, and his children were actually much younger than mine. He was never asked who's looking after your children when we would be at a public event or if a meeting went long. I was always asked that. I have not met a woman in my life, especially a South Asian woman in my life, who left a marriage because it wasn't the best thing for her and her family, right? Because it is not an easy thing to do. And I know as a mother and as a woman, not only me, but many women make very difficult choices, knowing what the consequences are, but because it is in the best interest of them and their family, not just them. And so, I learned a long time ago that if you try to live up to that standard, you will achieve nothing in your life. And so, what I've done is I've held strong, knowing that what my intentions are, and what my goals are, and who I surround myself with and bring with me, because that is a part of who I am, is to support others who are on a journey. But I will not be liked, right? There will always be stories, but those who are important to me know what's real and what is not. Harpo asking the tough questions really matters because there are women who are listening, and women who honestly are either inspired or actually discouraged from doing things in life because of other examples of people that they see in the community. And I think leadership really is about being able to make difficult decisions even when they're unpopular. And one thing I know about women, and including myself and my decision to leave my marriage, is that whether you decide to leave or you decide to stay, it's not an easy decision. And women don't make it selfishly. Women put a lot of thought into the decision because of the consequences, not only on their reputation, but also on their families. And so doing it means that you have not only given it thoughtful consideration, you've evaluated the impact it has on other people, and you do think about short term versus long term. And that's what good leadership is. And that's what we hope that women bring to all parts of their lives, whether it's their career, their families, or their public service. And I know for a fact that, women who are faced with this difficult choice of when a family is broken often feel guilty walking away, because then they're going to, be faulted for how their children turn out and other things. But broken homes don't come from divorce. They come from how the parents act after the divorce. And for the women who are encouraged by their friends and family to leave, um, we can't judge them if they don't, because only they know the circumstances of their intimate family. And keeping a family whole is equally as important as being whole as an individual. And just because a woman's divorced doesn't mean they don't value family.
And I think that's my understanding of feminism, really, and about women's empowerment. That's my understanding of it, is that we grant women choice. We grant them the choice to make the decisions of their lives. We consider them the experts, the best experts for the happenings of their lives. And so whether a woman decides to stay or a woman decides to leave, that's entirely up to her. And you're right, we cannot and we are not going to judge women for whichever one they choose.
No, and all we can do for women is do what so many women of your generation are now doing, which is not only having a voice, but in that voice talking about circumstances that are uncomfortable for people. And in that, women can then decide, do I feel like the best thing for me is to walk away, or is the best thing for me to try and get support and counseling for my spouse and my children and keep my family home? Whatever the decision is, it should be her decision and nobody should judge her for it, especially not society based on her career.
And Barinder, what do you think about that sentiment of like how well you're able to like manage your home and how that translates into how you would have done as a mayor? Like, what's the correlation with that?
Well, back to the correlation of what good leadership is. Good leadership is about making difficult decisions, even when they're not popular, and being able to see long term versus short term. And I made that decision for me and my family, not because of what was popular in the short term, but what was best for me and my kids in the long term. And I made a decision that was very unpopular because I knew it had no impact on how I served the public or how qualified I was to do the job. And the fact that in the year 2014 it was that people saw that as a gauge of judgment is really an indication of how much work we have to do still.
Yeah, I agree. A ton of work, a ton work. And we're recording this episode in 2021, and it seems like there's been some shifts, but I don't think that there's been astronomical shift since 2014. And I can think of so many cases where I know men in my life who I've interacted with, I've worked with even, who have done horrible things in their personal lives, but their professional lives are untouched, and the institutions that they belong to have done everything that they can to protect these men. And it's so saddening to see in 2021 that continues to happen.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. And it's not uncommon for a man to have be married a second time or even a third time. It's not uncommon for men in the community to have a wife and a girlfriend. It's not uncommon that men hit on younger, attractive women in their professional lives. It's very common knowledge, and nobody calls them out. And so, if anybody's going to ask the question of whether somebody is capable of doing their job well or being in a leadership position, maybe they should judge people by their individual behavior and how they treat others, not about what's going on in their intimate relationship in their own home. That really is nobody's business.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask you was about your kids, and then I removed it because I was like, no, we always fall into this trope of asking the woman about, like, well, what kind of an impact did it have on your kids when you were going through something so public? And I thought, that always happens. We always end up talking about like women's relationship as a mother to her children and the impact, and there's so much guilt that comes around that. And when we can sit and talk about the guilt that you might have experienced as a mother, when you were going through all of this, when you had, I didn't know how, I don't know how many children you have, but I'm sure that, you care about them a lot, and you don't want anything to happen to them. But even in framing the questions and framing the structure of this podcast episode, I was like, do I even want to talk about her kids? Because would I have asked a man that question? Would I ask a man, what impact did it have on your kids, and how are your kids dealing with it today?
Well, I think that's a valid question for any parent. I'm very proud of the fact I have three children. My children have always been a part of my public life, whether they attended events with me or whether they were a part of the media story when I ran. Any mom in any either career or even stay-at-home mom will look back and think, "Oh my God, I should have done so many things differently." But that's just being a parent. Um, did this affect my kids? For sure it did. Uh, I hope that, it's made them more resilient. It's taught them to be different. It's taught them about what real priorities are versus what the noise in the world is. But definitely, it's taught me that as a parent, you do have to teach your kids that being liked is an equality that you should hold up to a high standard. As long as you're a kind, empathetic person that has good intentions, there are always going to be people who are not only challenging you, but going around your back or trying to pull you down. And that's not a message that's talked about a lot. We focus a lot about support, empowerment, and building each other up. But no matter what you're doing, even if you're in the space of support, empowerment, and building people up, there are going to be some people who think you're doing it wrong. And so I think taking off your goals, being liked, is something that should just be crossed out right at the get-go.
I always share this that I'm like the black sheep of my family, like surprise, I'm the black sheep of my family. But I say this, and I said this in the intro that Barinder, you are someone who like really smashes this dichotomy of a good brown girl and a bad brown girl, because there's so many of us that will say, no, she's the like that's my role model, and you're one of my role models. So I don't even think that you're a bad brown girl. But then there's some people who think that you are a bad brown girl, and I also somehow smash that dichotomy in my life too. I am the most so my grandmother has 7 kids, and she's got like so many grandkids, and out of all the grandkids, I'm one of the loudest, one of the most disruptive. I'm one of the youngest too, but the most disruptive. Like I've got like 11 tattoos, and I do whatever I want. I've got a very unconventional career path, and everybody knows like Harpo has an opinion, and she's bold in everything she does. But simultaneously, I'm also one of like everyone's favorite, because I am so warm, I am so loving, I am so respectable and respectful. I've grown up with my grandparents, so I know all those things that a quote unquote good Punjabi girl does, right? She knows how to navigate a family. She knows how to be respectful to elders. I know how to navigate those ins and outs. But it's so interesting to me because you said something about I won't be liked, and I know that, and I know that even though simultaneously, yes, I am some people's favorite in my family, I'm also some people's like I'm the thorn in their side, because I trigger a lot for them that they either didn't have the capacity to also achieve or do or kind of go against that grain, but then also because it makes them uncomfortable, because it forces them to also recognize and see where they're lacking or they're at fault, or I make them uncomfortable because I'll say things to them that they don't like. There's an example that I love to share. I mean, there's a lot of equality and equity in my family, but my father and uncle in the past have only ever taken their sons to go meet political figures. There's like party thingies that happen, party thingies. That's the right way to say it. There's like these events that
Yeah,
happen
it
in
is. That's
Surrey.
exactly what it is.
Party thingies, right? It's just a bunch of
Yeah.
uncles. And so I was very upset with my dad once. I said, he took my younger brother, who was like 11 at the time, didn't care about any of these things, but took my brother to go meet the prime minister, right? And my brother has a picture of the prime minister, all these things. And I was so upset. I said, I'm a sociology student in university, and I care so passionately about social justice issues, and you took my 11-year-old brother who doesn't even know who that is, but you didn't take me. And I said, if that ever happens again, I'm going to be so upset. It did. It happened again. But the fact that I even was upset, the fact that I even expressed interest in going, I remember someone said, "Why are you so upset? Women don't go to those kinds of things." And I was like, "Excuse me? What do you mean women don't go to those things?" And so even then, even though there is equality, equity, all this kind of stuff in our homes, I still had to ask, like, why is that space not available to me? Why are you not actively making that space available to me? And I think that, yeah, I was really upset with my dad for a long time about that. But the fact that I even questioned that and said out loud that I wanted to be in those spaces was like a really big deal for them.
Well, one of the things is Punjabi women aren't in those places. There's lots of non-Punjabi women at those events.
Mm,
In fact, some of the candidates are usually non-Punjabi women. So again, back to our earlier conversation, what do they think about the woman who is running for office, who is in this room full of only men?
yeah.
And let me tell you also how debilitating it is as somebody who's trying to seek office when lots of these parties or political events are taking place in people's garages where there's alcohol and bakra making involved. And that's not a stereotype. That does happen in Surrey, right? How many women can go to the kabaddi field and take a mic and get the attention of all these potential voters? So as a South Asian woman, you're already set further behind than others because you're not supposed to be there and are not welcomed and are in fact not invited. Then for somebody like you, who's not only engaged and aware, but wanting to be a part of this process and are educating to be a part of this process, what message is it sending to you when even your dad, who loves and values you and wants to see success for you, doesn't feel safe taking you into that environment?
Mm-hmm.
So, back to the whole question about why women who seek public office get a bad name, no matter what they're like, it goes back to this whole socialization of that space that we have created here in Canada that should not exist, but we've our community has created it. So that's very telling. I want to talk about one other thing that you said, and that's about navigating, that you can navigate the family well. So I'm going to throw this back on you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
No, because right, and the word respectable, like what does respectable mean, and what does proper navigation mean? So everything I read about or watch on TV is that navigation of a family shouldn't be more than love, respect, empathy, kindness, and unquestioned loyalty. That should be what navigating a family is about. Do you think that's what it is for us? And are those the things that you talk about when you say I can navigate my family properly?
In my head, it's the things that you've said, right? In my head, that's what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
on the
yeah,
external, I'll say it in Punjabi because I don't know how to say it in English. Harpreet family vich rahiya, onu rehna aunda hai, family de vich, right? And what is that? It's
yeah,
compromise, right? It's putting yourself
yeah,
second. It's always putting someone
yeah,
else first. It's
yeah,
stepping into this like domestic nurturer role for everyone but yourself. That's what navigating a family means in those
yeah,
terms.
yeah,
But
yeah,
in my head, it's all those things that you said, right?
yeah, yeah. And it should be, if we can't have, if our families aren't our safe spaces where we feel that we have complete equality, and where we can express our vulnerabilities and our dreams and be supported in that, none of us South Asian women are navigating a family, because
Mm-hmm.
I would argue I have yet to meet anybody who has that in its entirety. And that again, it's something that hopefully will shift over time, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because we're also not about our nuclear families. Our family
Mm-hmm.
definition is about extended families. And then if it's not extended families, it's the aunties and uncles that you meet at receptions and at the gurdwara or even in the mall. Immediately you go, oh my God, like, oh, so and so's here. And even if that's at Costco, but you sneaked out in your shorts versus putting on your sweats. And that's a thing that I think is going to take so much time. But again, it's not going to just take the men, it's going to take the women as well.
Yeah. I love what you said in your entire spiel about the Bukra party. I love why you said that. And because you honestly you hit the nail on the head. That
Yeah,
my mom always says that people see the world the way that they walk through the world, right? So
mhm,
it's like the way that you are is how you see other people. And so if you feel like you're uncomfortable as an uncle about a woman showing up or like a woman in your family going into a space, it's because you know how you have socially created that space and what that space looks like, and you feel like it's
yeah,
unsafe for the women in your family to enter. It's okay for other women to be there because they're not your family and you don't care about them, but it's unsafe. And that's why
yeah,
instead of just vocalizing that and saying that, you would rather they not be there, because then it makes you question how you've shown up in that space and how you've constructed that space. And you said that it's so hard. And, I'm sitting here and it's so easy for me to say, Barinder, you're such a powerful, strong woman, but it must not have been easy to be first the kind of fish that is swimming upstream, right, to swim against the wave and the current, but then also to receive a lot of hate for being someone who is authentically themselves and who is swimming upstream already, but then who is labeled constantly as this bad brown girl. How did you deal with it? Like on the exterior, yes, you did it really well, but there must have been so many points where it was so hard and you just wanted it to end.
you know it, this is going to sound how do I say it, I don't mean this to sound hard, because I am an empathetic, compassionate person who really, really cares about people.
Mm.
I knew as soon as I chose to do this that there would be a part of me that literally just didn't give two hoots. You can't, right? Because otherwise you would never do it. It's like the same for me stepping into the plant medicine space now, right? So there was a post when I first entered the cannabis space. And somebody, South Asian male, posted, "Oh, look, now she's acting like she did this, this, and this, and now it's like she's a porn star." Like they equated my work in the legalized cannabis space to that of being a porn star. So I, on DMs, called out a couple of the men who liked that post. And they're like, well, now, there's such a big drug problem in the South Asian community, and now you're out there selling drugs. I said, I'm not selling anything. I'm working on policy,
Yeah.
right? I'm now in a space that's legalized for this country. And if you look at the future of science and dealing with the opioid crisis or addictions or mental health, it's all plant based medicines that are a part of our culture, Chinese traditional culture. But none of them called out any of the men who set foot into the cannabis space. I've never heard anybody question them. So it's as soon as you choose to have an opinion that is different than others, that women will get targeted in the same way. So if I chose to pay any attention to any of them, I wouldn't do anything. So for me, the most powerful place to be in life is to be indifferent. And I am very indifferent to those narrow minded, uneducated beliefs that some people choose to hold on what equates people as being respectable, acceptable, and somebody that they're willing to stand by based on their personal choices, not on their core values, beliefs, or their policy direction. Indifference.
Facts.
I don't care.
Yeah, you don't care. So, on that note, I
Yeah.
want you to tell me and tell anybody else that's listening. If we've talked about, the bad brown girl starter pack, let's talk about what a good brown
Yeah.
girl is. In your own definition, in your eyes, what is a good brown girl? What is a good brown girl to you and to anyone else who needs to throw out their definition of a good brown girl out the window?
Well, I'm just going to choose not to even use the word good. Good is
Yes.
something that I use for our puppies, because I'm trying to encourage proper behavior to make sure they're house trained. Women are not needing to be house trained, right? So let's get rid of that word completely. And what I hope is that we talk about empowered women who are able to use their voice and actually have power, not only over their personal lives, but their professional lives. So let's throw out the dichotomy that we've been asked to fit in, whether it's good or bad. Let's just talk about empowered, authentic, powerful women. That's it.
That's it. There's nothing else more to it. Honestly, I think that the second that we start to create boxes, we have to start fitting people into
Yes.
them, and that's where we run into trouble. And you and I met at our the first time in 2019 when I spoke at She Talks, the conference for women to come and speak in, that you've started with other powerful women in the community. And my entire speech, at the She Talks conference was about how I used to be labeled as too much, and I used to talk too much. And I use this metaphor of a box, right? And I've actually, I've got a wall behind me that's got a bunch of frames I can show you because we're on camera. And so I've got a bunch of them, and I've actually framed the tweet that She Talks tweeted out on the day of the conference. And they quoted me, and it says, the world will always try to fit you into a box, but pick up the box, flatten it, stomp on it a couple times, and go chuck it in the recycling box, because you were not made to be boxed in. And I think that you said it perfectly. That dichotomy of the good and the bad makes you pick a box. And that's it. We're done. In 2021, we're done with choosing boxes.
We are done with choosing boxes, and we as women need to also check our own biases and really think about the terms that we use to define other women and how we choose to define like success.
Mm-hmm.
Just let everybody be who they are and define the best version of themselves. And as long as you're not intentionally lying, cheating, or hurting somebody, everybody is like an amazing woman. That's it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Barinder, for having this conversation with me and asking you like very blunt, bold questions. I commend you even in talking, but you said it. You don't give a shit. So if you don't give a shit, nobody else needs to give a shit. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me, and then also for sponsoring the Brown Girl Guild, the BGG scholarship that we ran throughout this month. It means so much to me that you supported me, and then we're all going to get to support another young woman entrepreneur. And I know it's so important to you to elevate and to really lay the foundation for other women to work their way up. So thank you so much for making that possible for us, and just supporting us and loving us through all of this.
Well, thank you for having me, and keep up everything that you're doing, and just be empowered and authentic and just keep going.
Something Brinder just said at the end of this episode is that as women, we really need to check our own biases. And I'm going to be very honest in saying that the way that I even asked some of those questions to Brinder, or the way that I set up this episode, still bought into a lot of those biases. And I love that she said at the end that I want to get rid of that word good when it comes to a good brown girl altogether. And it's true. I think that there are certain biases that I'm also constantly checking about myself when it comes to this dichotomy of a good brown girl and a bad brown girl all the time. And I think that it's so good to be called in by people in your life that love you and you love, call those people in, open yourself up to being called in so you can unwork and unlearn those biases. I had a situation like that very recently. And even though it made me very uncomfortable, and it gave me a lot of anxiety, I was really, really honored and just grateful that somebody called me in on my preconceived biases. And if life isn't just us figuring ourselves out, unlearning our behaviors, and getting rid of those and unpacking those biases, then what is it, right? So, again, I love to say, grant yourself and other people grace on this journey as we are coming home to ourselves, as we are kind of, getting a whiteboard marker and sorry, not a whiteboard marker, a whiteboard brush, and just like brushing ourselves off and getting rid of all the residue. We have to grant ourselves grace on that journey, ourselves and to other people, because it can be a really lonely, isolating journey. But if Barinder has taught us anything, it's to just not give a shit, man. Just stay in your lane. Just do your thing. It's all good. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode. This past month has been so fantastic. It's been so strong, and I can't wait for us to go into the next one. As always, I really need you guys to like, subscribe, and comment and review and share the episode. I said that very aggressively. It's not that you guys aren't already doing that. I just feel like aggression gets you guys. But I need you guys to do all of those things because that's what helps me. That's what's going to help me pop off, babies. Anyway, gratitude, glory, and grace to you guys all. I love you guys, and I'll see you at the next one.